We want to welcome you to the 6th session of Building Blocks of Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare. This session will be talking about feeding infants, specifically pace bottle feeding and a lot of child-led weaning. Some really amazing topics that I think would be helpful for everyone across the state as we're having these conversations. And so if anybody else has joined, make sure that you're putting your name in the chat box along with your program, school, or agency, and then also your county. My name is Shauna Daniels. I am a member of the Breastfeed Orange NC group and also a member of the Global Breastfeeding Communities Board. I am being joined by Jenny Ogden, who is the director at the Little School of Hillsborough. I'll introduce her a little bit later. Jenny, you want to wave so everybody can see you? So you can go ahead and turn off your screens now. And I keep saying screens, but your cameras now. And that way we'll be able to save some bandwidth for the people that, especially me, who normally freeze during the presentations. And I think it'll make it a little easier for us to hear and see each other. Next slide, please. So this is our agenda. If you've been with us before, you know that our agenda is pretty much the same each time. We'll do a short welcome, which I'm doing now. We'll talk a little bit about the why we're even having these breastfeeding, building blocks for breastfeeding friendly childcare learning bursts. And then we'll get into the topic of infant feeding. After the infant feeding discussion with Jenny, we will then have small breakout groups talking about next steps, and then we'll do some announcements at the end. So let's get started. So for those of you who have never joined us, we always start the meetings with with this specific video that talks about the health benefits of health equity and where childcare sits within the community offering health equity for families. So go ahead and we'll watch it.
Is there a place where everyone, regardless of race, economic background, or gender, grows up with the opportunity for good health, a good education, and a good job? This place is not in our heads, but in our hands. It starts with a mother and a baby. Actually, it can start with all of us. It can start with you. When you support a woman's health long before she chooses to have a baby, and when she gets pregnant, you help her receive excellent prenatal care close to her home, where you explain why breastfeeding matters in a manner and language she understands. Before she gives birth, in a baby-friendly hospital you helped establish, where you help her breastfeed her baby right away, allowing her to bond with her baby, who breastfeeds well, and you're always there to help. When this mom and baby go home, you help them some more, and her friends and family do too. And she breastfeeds her baby for at least 6 months, and gets to stay home and care for her baby. And her partner gets time too, because they have paid family leave, thanks to your efforts that made it the law. And when she returns to work, her boss encourages her to take breaks, to pump in a clean space required by the law you helped pass. And there's childcare right there, where people understand why breastfeeding matters, because you led the way. On the weekends, her family shops at a local green market you helped set up, where they buy good food that is local, healthy, and affordable, that helps her child run, play, learn, and grow up in a safe community with clean air and good water, until one day, many years from now, she gets her own job with good parental leave and has her own child and breastfeeds her. It takes every one of us to create a culture where breastfeeding is the norm and help a community become healthy right from the start. Beginning with one mother and one baby, we can help achieve health equity everywhere. Each and every one of us can make it possible.
Kellogg Foundation video will be linked in the information that you get post this session if you complete the the post assessment that will be given. The link will be given at the end. So we are always looking at what's healthiest for the children that we care for, specifically in childcare. And as a part of what we're doing as a group with the building blocks is we're also using the Carolina Global Breastfeeding Initiative's 10 Steps for Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare. And these specific parts of the 10 steps are listed. They're connected directly to infant feeding. So we always kind of start with what our standards are, and this is our standard. These include not just the feeding practices that we have in childcare centers, but the way that we interact with children, the way that we store and prepare breast milk and food for children, relationships with families, creating policies and feeding plans that families are a part of, and then always encouraging mothers to introduce the solid foods at a developmentally appropriate time like we would be doing in centers. So lots of working with families to support them to make sure that they understand. Sometimes they don't always understand what's developmentally appropriate. They just know what they're doing at the time or what their family has done, which isn't always the most developmentally appropriate. So if you're looking at the CGBI 10 steps, these are the parts of the 10 steps that match our conversation today on infant feeding. So I want us to hurry up and get into this conversation. So I'm really excited for Jenny to share with you all. Jenny is the director at the Little School of Hillsborough. I have had the pleasure of working with her in a variety of different roles, but she's been at the Little School for nearly 11 years. She's been a teacher, a mentor, and the school director. A graduate of Barton College. She started out in elementary education and was like, hold up, this isn't what I love. This isn't bringing me all the joy. And ended up joining the Little School in 2010, where she found the joy. So having taught just about every age group, does that include school age, Jenny?
Yeah, I've done my stint in after school also.
Yeah, love that. Okay, so having done all of the age groups and all of the classrooms at the Little School, she has had several different positions within the Little School organization. And when she's not working at the Little School, she enjoys time with her husband and their older young children, baking, traveling, and hiking. Jenny, I'm so excited to have you talk about this. I'm going to mute so you can go ahead.
Thank you, Shauna. I am really excited to be here and to be talking specifically about feeding infants. It's something that is really exciting for me and something I'm truly passionate about. In my roles here and in my almost 11 years, one of my favorite places to be is in our infant classrooms. And it's something that, like I said, I'm truly passionate about. And so I'm going to get into it. I'm going to start a little bit just talking about our schools. So we do have two campuses. We have the Little School of Hillsborough and the Little School at Duke. But a little background about us. The Little School was founded by Jennifer Adams, and it came about when she was looking for a quality child care center for her two young children in 2004, as she was planning to go back to work as a school psychologist, and quickly realized that high quality care in this area was not readily available, and the places that were here had very long wait lists, and so obviously there was a need for additional centers. So she had this brilliant idea to start her own school, and so in this time she also met Mary Swanson, and together they built our first school and opened in September of 2005. In a small setting, wooded setting. It had 3 classrooms, 6 teachers, and lots of plans and ideas. Over the next 5 years, that very small school was literally bursting at the seams. And so with the desire and vision for a larger campus, they actually designed and built our current Hillsborough location and opened in January of 2010. And it was at that time that that the little school solidified its philosophy, which consists of 5 big ideas. And that is regio, conscious discipline, observations and portfolio, natural play, and nourishment. Nourishment was the last idea that was created, and actually created after I became here. But one of the things that Jennifer realized was that there was a moment in the middle of our day that had become a throwaway moment. And so when they opened this campus, one of her kind of requirements was that there would be a kitchen that would provide meals for our families, or for our children, and then later on for our families. I have a short video that I want to show you that talks a little bit more about our nourishment.
Right. Here you go. You're feeling. She's trying. Hop into your chair. 4, 5, 6, 7.
And smelling, oh friends, prepare for fireworks in your mouth. Oh my goodness, the curry train is back. Curried lentil salad with cauliflower, carrots, and a little lemon dressing. Are we ready? What are we gonna wash? We're gonna wash our toes? Toes? Feet? Our hands. That's right, let's go wash our hands. You're gonna put milk in your feet? Drinking milk from our feet today.
Once upon a time, we just had our food brought in for us. And it was this throwaway, like everything we were doing was so intentional. We were just throwing lunch away. So when we built this campus, we knew we wanted to have chefs. We wanted to have real chefs. These are chefs that have been classically French trained chefs. They've worked at restaurants, amazing restaurants all over the country. And then they come here and they give us gourmet food for our kids, which is incredible. And I guarantee you that our children are gonna have a better lunch than what the parents are eating every day.
We work very hard to be intentional when we are planning menus. The chefs try to use seasonal ingredients. They try very hard to push the boundaries of children's tastes, but also within a safe place so that they feel able to take risks.
Hi there, I'm Chef Nate McMullen. I've had the pleasure of cooking here at the little school for about 7 years now. We bring food and snacks around to each classroom. And when they see us enter, it's a very excited state.
Hey guys, okay, so today's lunch, we've got beef and bean chili. There you go.
adults and the children lead us in a breath. And that is designed, because now we're here, we're super excited to be here at lunch, and that is designed to now, all right, let's calm us down a little, let's calm us down, let's get ready. Even the youngest guys from 18 months old, you'll see them, they'll take their plates and they'll walk on over to the bus stop and they'll separate their forks and their cups and their silverware, and it's this great sorting process for them, and it's also giving them ownership of, you know, cleaning up after themselves, taking responsibility, because that's something that we do in our community, is that we help each other and we clean up so that it's not just for one person to do.
Sitting in a high chair where they're really confined and they're being force fed from a spoon. I mean, they're right from the start. Kids are learning how to self-regulate. Kids are learning how to interact with their food and play with their food and make it a positive thing. And no one's being forced to eat their fruits and vegetables. They think about food and nourishment more than just the actual act of eating, but that is sort of how we teach kids about how to make choices, how to have exposure, how to self-regulate as it relates to eating. So.
Radishes and lime dressing. Yummy.
Being able to support our own food program ourselves through farmers instead of depending on corporate suppliers I'm very proud of that. I know the food that we're putting in these kids' bodies is the best quality, the most healthy that we could possibly get.
All right, so I get so that kind of gives you a roundabout of how nourishment kind of leads us into feeding, and kind of leads us into what that looks like for our infants. So, when we are talking about nourishment for infants or for all of our children here, one of the things that we talk about there are 3 things that we as adults cannot control with children. And those are what goes in, what comes out, and whether or not they sleep. We can create environments that are conducive to such, and we can encourage them in different ways, but ultimately that is really up to the child. If they're not going to eat, they're not going to eat. If they don't have to go to the bathroom, they're not going to go to the bathroom. If they don't want to sleep, there's no possible way that we can actually force them to go to sleep. And so for us, it really comes down to listening to children and acknowledging and valuing what they're telling us, whether they can tell us verbally or with cues. And part of that is feeding and how we feed bottles. And so paced bottle feeding is a theory, and we practice a version of paced bottle feeding. And like I said, we listen to our infants. So our infants come to us about 12 weeks old. They are on some kind of schedule. The mom might say every 2 to 3 hours or every 3 to 4 hours. But really what we're looking at within those time frames are those cues that is what they need. So we're looking for them, rubbing their mouth on different things or making sucking noises, those types of things, before we automatically go to, that's what they need. They need a bottle right now. They're crying, and so they must be hungry. And so what we're trying to do in that is create good, healthy eating habits. And we do the same while they're taking their bottles. So you can see in these pictures that our children are held while they're given their bottles. And that's with all of our bottles. So sometimes children have to wait for a few minutes so that we can finish with one child and go to the next. But it's really important to us that these children get that independent time and that we're really focusing on that specific child when they're feeding. While we're feeding, like I said, listening to those cues to know that they're hungry, we're listening for those or watching for those cues when they're done or when they need to take a break. So you'll see with like the younger infants in this photo, the teachers are holding the bottles. What we're looking for are, like they're not sucking on the bottle anymore. We might lower the bottle during that time or ask them, are you all done? Do you need to take a break? And if they still are not showing interest, then we might let them go back and play for a little while before offering it again, just really listening to what they're telling us. If a child refuses the bottle, a lot of times as they get older, they'll actually push it away. For us, even though they're not verbally telling us they're all done for now. And so we will put that bottle to the side and allow them to get back to whatever they were doing before that feeding started, really allowing them to tell us what they need in that moment. So once children get to a certain age, pediatricians and parents start talking about introducing solids. And that's looked very different for us over the years. These are some old pictures. I literally had to scan them into my computer because they were like real pictures that were developed. But you'll see here, they do have Whole Foods in front of them, but these children are a little bit older. In times back before 2014, it was common practice for us to do what we all thought was the right thing and what kind of the industry and pediatricians over the years have told us, which is introducing and feeding children purees. I have a very vivid picture in my brain of the first infant classroom that I taught, sitting in front of a child who was strapped into a low high chair, and two children, and feeding them like left spoon, right spoon, left spoon, right spoon. And remember and thinking like, this goes against everything we talk about in every other aspect of teaching. This is not a teaching moment. They're not really learning or gaining any skill in this moment. And so that kind of sent me on a search to find something different. At this point, I had been here for several years, and I knew that if I wanted to present something to my leadership team, what I needed to do is have some research to back it up, some kind of knowledge to say, like, I really think this is a good idea for our kids or for our children and the infants in our care. And so in my search, I found baby-led weaning. Right away, I was a new mother of two, and realized that I was never going to be able to make fresh purees for my own child, and just kind of started giving him whole food right away anyway. And I was like, oh, this thing has a name and it makes sense. We have these wonderful chefs who are cooking these amazing meals for the rest of the campus, and only the infants aren't benefiting from this. And how can I make this work with our infants? And so I took this research that I had gathered and I presented it to the leadership team. And Jennifer right away was like, yes, this is exactly why we created these campuses with kitchens in them, was so we could feed children good food. So yeah, let's do it. How do we move from here? How do we present it to families? How can we kind of get this started? There were lots of conversations with the leadership team, and then again with the chefs on like, would this be possible? Can you make this kind of happen in our realm? And so it started. Kind of going back to like, what is baby-led weaning and child-led weaning? Because in the US, weaning refers to reducing of breast or bottle feeding. So a lot of times when we talk about weaning babies, we talk about weaning them off of bottles or weaning them off of the breast. And that's actually not the case in other places. Like the UK, weaning refers to adding complementary foods. And so introducing new food and introducing whole food. And so that's why it's called child-led weaning or baby-led weaning. They have talked about changing the name over the years, but kind of comes too late, right? They talk about like self-feeding instead of child-led weaning. So kind of taking that weaning out. But the weaning is stuck. So here we are. But it really talks about how in the beginning, so when you start feeding children complementary foods, usually around 6 months of age, between 4 to 6 months, which is when the pediatrician says this is when you should start kind of table food is what they label it. But don't really give specifics on what that looks like, whether it's purees or whole food. So child-led weaning usually starts around 6 months. We really want the children to be an established sitter at that time. What we need to remember, and I think something that gets lost in this, is that all of these infants are getting all the nutrients that they need during that time from the breast milk or formula that we're feeding them. Adding food in is just a way to allow them to develop skills that they will need after they turn a year old. So really what our goal is to give them these opportunities, so 2 snacks and a lunch a day, to develop a relationship with the food. Just like everything else that infants do, they need to touch, smell, they need to taste everything. They need to hear the sounds that it makes to develop a relationship and to understand more what those things are. So if we start introducing of the food in that way as an opportunity to learn something, they're going to have a better understanding of that food as they get older. And by the time they turn a year old, they are going to be taking in all the nutrients that they need for their bodies. So that is our goal in this. So you might have questions about like, how do you get this started? How did you get parents on board? My first year was really easy. And I think it's because we kind of started with the old way and then just kind of spiraled into the new one. But my second year was a little bit harder, coming in with new infants who were a little bit younger than we had started in the first year. But one of the things that we do now is we start the conversations when these parents tour or they enroll. You'll see over here to the side, I have a letter or an article that we provide for our families. And this is actually from babyledweaning.com. It's the first site that I found that explained baby-led weaning and my aha moment. And so we actually share this with our families. When we're doing a tour and we're talking specifically about infants, I mention this during that time. And so that's not the only thing they're going to take away from that tour, but at least it plants a bug in their ear. Then once the children enroll and we do our parent orientation at the beginning of the year, we always do a separate section on infants, because let's face it, there's a lot more things that go into bringing an infant to childcare than there is to bringing a 4-year-old to childcare. So we always do like just a special section. And again, we'll plant that seed of this is how we're going to handle feeding when it's time. And again, just returning to that conversation when that child is nearing that 4 to 6 month age range, and the child begins to sit up on their own and really establish those core muscles. And then sooner or later, those parents are going to say, oh, our pediatrician said they can start table food. And so one of the things that pediatricians always recommend, and we recommend also, is that parents always try foods first at home. What we really want to do with that is make sure there's no allergies involved. And if there are, they're not experiencing those with us. Not that we can't handle them, but making sure that our environment is just as safe as possible. And then once the child is eating at school and they are starting this journey, just to continue to communicate the progress with the parents. So here's a little one, and she's trying strawberries for the first time, and you can really see the progress in this, that she's touching it, she's tasting it, looking at it again. What is this thing? And trying it again. One of the other really important things that I always like to remind teachers about is that children need to try a new food 10 to 15 times before they decide they like it or not. So I know when my oldest child was younger, I would try purees because that's what I was told to do. And she wouldn't like it. And I'd be like, oh, it's fine. Like, she doesn't like it. But actually, those children need to try those things over and over and over again to make sure that it is that they don't like the thing. Going back to developing those relationships, one of the really things that I cannot focus on enough is that this really should be a learning experience for these children. There shouldn't be pressure on making sure we're getting calories in or they're eating this much of this food. It really should just be like chill learning experience for these children. So they're really developing those relationships with children or with food. So here's a couple more pictures. And you'll notice that in both of these pictures, the teacher is sitting with the children. So of course, for safety reasons, the teacher needs to be with the children at all times, just in case anything happens. But the teacher is also there to have conversation with these children. Infants learn by conversation and repetitive labeling and words between adults. And so we want that teacher sitting at the table, talking about what they're eating, talking about what's in front of them. The teacher in the middle is actually teaching sign. And so she's teaching that child how to say more. So not only are we using those verbal conversations, but also teaching them a way that they can communicate with us before they have those verbal skills. So here are some pictures just of kind of how this progresses. And you see our very little ones up into our toddlers, and the food that they're eating. These, like Jennifer said in the video, this is the best food that we could possibly provide for these children. And one of the things that we have noticed over the past 7 years since we officially started our journey with baby-led weaning or child-led weaning is that we've seen a dramatic drop in various food aversions. I remember just a few well, I guess 7 years ago, we had lots of children that had different kinds of food aversions, whether it was texture or food preference. We had lots of children who refused to eat anything if their food were touching. They had to have deconstructed meals. So if we had pizza, they would have all the elements of the pizza in different bowls and they would put it together, but they couldn't handle if we put it together. One of the things that baby-led weaning has afforded us is that opportunity to really start introducing these foods, these textures, these smells, these tastes at a very young age. And so by the time they get to those toddler years, there's a lot less aversions. They already know what to expect when that food comes to them, which has been amazing. One of the other sides of that is that we have seen a huge jump in food consumption. And so although that hasn't really changed much as far as how much it costs per child, but our children always want more. Right now, due to COVID, we are not able to eat in our dining room, which you saw in our video. We're not allowed to do communal eating, but they are eating in their classroom, and it happens every day that the classrooms are calling the kitchen asking for more food. Our children really enjoy our food. And one of the things I kind of skimmed over in the beginning was that not only are we feeding our children here, but our chefs have also been able to provide meals for our families. So it's really important to us that we're not just feeding the children here, that they're also getting that food at home. So our parents can pre-order up to 2 meals a week that they pick up at pickup time and take home and feed their family. Our food program is definitely something that is different about us and unique and wonderful. And I hope you can take some of these ideas back with you.
As a TA, I made sure that I went into the classrooms right around lunchtime, just about every time. Thank you so much, Jenny. I'm looking at the clock and I'd like to do questions after we do the breakout groups, if that's okay.
Yeah.
But if you have questions for Jenny, hold on to them. Unless you happen to end up in her group, you can ask her there. Otherwise, we'll come back. I'll give you a couple more minutes. You can ask any of the questions that are still lingering. So I'm going to move everyone into breakout groups. Once you go there, you'll have a couple of questions to ask or answer. We want to know something that you learned from the session, something that you might already be doing similar to this that would move you just a little bit more towards the infant feeding that's more child-centered. And then if there's any challenges you want to talk about, bring those up too. But let's at least talk about one thing you've learned and maybe some of the challenges. You should have at least one TA in your group, or you're going to end up in Jenny's group. And you'll definitely be able to talk through some of these things as well. So I'll go ahead and move everyone in there, and it's 1:43 on my computer, so I'll bring us back in 10 minutes. You've got 10 whole minutes this time. So hopefully you got to at least start the conversation, get a little reflection happening around feeding infants and how that happens in your centers. Before we leave and I give you the final information, are there any questions for Jenny that specifically you didn't, since you weren't in her group, you didn't get to ask her anything?
One thing that came up in our group, we were curious about any choking. If you were ever worried about choking hazards and what you were doing around, ensuring that was covered, which you might have mentioned and I might have missed it, but.
Sure. So actually, we talked about this in our breakout group because I feel like this is one of the number one challenges when we talk to parents about it. They're like, what if they choke? So one thing that all of us know is that all of the childcare teachers have to be trained in first aid and CPR. This is one of the reasons, right? So if the worst should happen, we are trained to deal with situations like that. I will say in my time, it hasn't happened. And one of the other things that I didn't mention, I could talk all day about baby-led weaning, but one of the things that we didn't talk about was the science behind baby-led weaning. When you are feeding purees, you're actually teaching children how to swallow food before they learn how to chew food. And so actually it's more likely that once you introduce whole food, they will choke. When you're doing baby-led weaning, you're developing that relationship, and part of that relationship is putting the food in their mouth, moving it around, actually learning how to chew that food before they swallow it. On our journey, the thing that I've noticed is that a lot of children will put things in, like put the food in their mouth, chew it up, and then spit it out. And that is them just learning how to chew. And because they're spitting it out and they're not taking it, it's okay, because again, they're not getting that nourishment that they need by eating food. They're going to get it in their milk later. So it actually helps with choking. Also, it is important to know that infants come pre-made with a choke reflex. Like their anatomy is made to get things out of their throat. And so it is less likely that they're choking. I cannot stress enough, if they are coughing, they're not choking. That is them. That is their mechanism to get that thing out of their throat.
Yeah, just to go along with that really quick, a part of the child-led weaning too is knowing the sizes that children, like getting the right sizes. I put in the chat box earlier a group called Solid Starts, and it's actually a parent-led group, but they have a really cool website. Their Facebook and Instagram always have really amazing information on them, and they actually show the different sizes of foods, the types of foods you can start. So good information to share with parents that if they've never done it before, how they can start figuring out what to give children early on, and then also what sizes and to do it. But
yeah, so we also talked about in our workout group, talking about we didn't talk necessarily about sizes, but usually if it's a larger food, you would cut it in like stick form, something that they can use their palmar grasp to hold. So like carrots, you would want to cut it like in strips so that they can hold it and chew on it. I also say that we give our infants, the only things we give them is something you can pinch between two fingers. So like blanched carrots or broccoli, it will hold its shape, but if you pinched it, it will fall apart.
So kind of like if they had to just mush down on it and didn't have any, they could still mush down on it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. A great question. Any other questions for Jenny? I can take one more.
I do if nobody else does. I really would like to know if you have any, if you talk with your teachers or your parents about maintaining milk supply after the introduction of solids, or if it would be helpful if we created something around that.
We really haven't. I don't think it's come up. I think partly because we're not trying to push food on them. You know, like we're really adamant about like, this is just so they can learn. This is not to replace what you are doing, whether it's breastfeeding or formula. I haven't had that come up yet.
Well, I'll create that infographic and send it out for you guys, and give me feedback on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
That'd be awesome.
All right, thank you all. I'm so excited that we got to have this conversation. I've been waiting since we started. I think this is one of the first ones I looked at Natasha and was like, I got somebody that can do the baby-led weaning. There was no question. I didn't know which ones I was going to do, but I knew which one Jenny was going to do. I just want to thank all of the organizations that are a part of what I keep changing the name, but this Building Blocks for Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Collaborative is what I'm calling it right now today. Maybe tomorrow I'll change it. But we do have CGBI. We have representatives from CGBI, Buncombe County Partnership, the Orange County Partnership for Young Children, NCPC, the Breastfeed Durham and Breastfeed Orange are also engaged in this work. So sometimes you get on sessions and somebody from one of those groups will be on there with us. If you are interested in either getting a certificate or also getting the resource list, you need to be able to do a post assessment for me. Let me pull that up because I didn't get the link for you. It's a really quick, it's very similar to the pre-assessment or that registration that you did at the beginning. And here, I'll put it in the chat box, not just to Anna Mercer.
And while she's talking about that, let me plug our next class, which is going to be next month. And that will be Love Anderson talking about community resources. And it's going to be really great. How to connect with them, how to create resources for your childcare center that meet your local and regional needs. And
so when we're talking about that designation, we are talking about giving parents the information they need about breastfeeding resources as they're making that transition into the center. The link is in the chat box, but that next one will be really important, especially if you don't know where to start to find those resources that you one need for the designation or need for families, just to know what's around for them. Did you get the date, Natasha? It's July. I want to say it's the 8th, but I'll probably be wrong on that one. It's the second Tuesday in July.
That's the 13th.
Okay, so that's the one
the
then.
13th at 1 p.m.
So
please register by the 9th of July.
And everyone that has signed up for this one will get an email reminding you to register for that one as well with the link. So the post assessment link is in the chat box. You can complete that. And when you get that, you'll get a certificate and the resource link. So even if you don't really need the certificate, but you want those resource links, you got to do the post for me to be able to get that to you. We really appreciate Jenny, for coming out and spending your 3rd Zoom meeting with us just to share this information I know you're so in love with, and everyone else that came and joined and participated with us. Thank you so much, and you all take care.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.